Hello, Year 9, it's Mr. Brennan, and this is our first attempt at producing you some sort of PowerPoint with a voiceover, and hopefully in the future you'll be able to see my face. But I thought I'd just try and talk you into the new topic. Before we start, I will say that I hope everybody's well and staying safe and working really hard. I have to say I'm very impressed with the quality of the work and the resilience you are showing in these strange times. And hopefully, remember, we will be together again. We will all get to go back to school and we'll all get to be successful together. Our new topic is looking at energy, and we're looking at this in a global context rather than a UK context. So the work you did prior to your assessment was looking at resources in the UK. You looked at food, water and energy. In the exam, we have to then focus just on one resource, and that resource we look at is energy because it fits in with some of the other work that we do. What I'm going to be asking you to do on a weekly basis is one key objective a week. And if you've seen the booklet uploaded in Teams, you'll know that there are 7 key objectives. I only want you to do one a week. This is because what I'd like you to be doing in that time that you might have spare then to be producing some revision resources, because you'll remember I'm very keen on you committing things to your long-term memory. And we do that by going back to things, creating revision resources, mind maps, flashcards, condensed notes, visual aids, all those kind of things. And it's really important that you do this, and we'll give you a few prompts on a weekly basis, but I want you to focus on the work you've done in lockdown, because that's where you've not had chance to come back to your teachers and ask them exactly what you should have been covering. We will update you weekly about what we think you could be doing a revision resource on. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea about what will be happening this half term. So you should be able to see my PowerPoint, and you'll see that I've taken the 2 pieces from the specification to summarise energy as a topic. So we're going to look at some key ideas. We're going to look at why the demand for energy resources is rising globally, but the supply can be something called insecure and how that might lead to conflict. And then the second part is about how we can use different strategies can be used to increase energy supply. You will have seen things before at Key Stage 3 and in previous topics in Year 9 that will link to this. So there are no great surprises, and it's about working with a bit of resilience again on a weekly basis. In your booklet, I'm going to give you a minute or two, so just pause the video and think about why has global energy consumption increased. Normally I'd take some feedback, but obviously I just want you to think about some of your key ideas. Pause this video now. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you've got a few ideas about why global energy consumption has increased. The main 2 reasons why global energy consumption has increased are quite obvious. The first is we have an increasing population. That population is growing. The more people, the more energy is used. The second reason is a little bit more difficult, but not that hard. It's because people are increasingly wealthy. If you think about the work we've done on development, we know that LICs are becoming NEEs, they're industrialising and urbanising, and in those areas they will use more energy in houses and cars, and as people have got more wealth, they'll buy more things. Therefore, energy consumption increases. So the first key objective we're going to look at, and this is to this week's work, what is the global pattern of energy supply and demand? So what I want you to really understand by the end of this week's work and when you submit is to know what energy insecurity and security is. 2 key terms, again, not overly complex. To understand the energy gap and how this presents challenges for nations. And again, the energy gap's slightly trickier, but not that difficult. And to be able to interpret key graphs. We're very good at that, and I'll remind you of the rules as they come up. Normally our ATL will be to make thoughtful and well supported contributions. You can still do this yourself at home. You can discuss this with whoever's in the house with you, or friends online, however you want to do it. At the end, though, all of you should have used the graphs to complete some key skills questions. And some of you, at the end, will have done a 6-mark question looking at the impact of energy insecurity globally. So, I'm going to ask you to pause the video again, and this is a starting task. Make a mind map of all the ways we use energy. Think about it in terms of you, what you see in society and globally. Pause the video. I'll come back to you shortly. Okay, welcome back again. Now, hopefully you've got quite a lot of different uses of energy there. The 3 main uses that you should be able to categorise everything into is number 1, transportation. Vehicles, planes, boats, how we get around, how we move things from one place to another, which then includes things like trade. The second is about industry, how industry uses energy. If you think about manufacturing, which much of it has gone out to newly emerging economies like China, and they're using coal to develop. The third, and probably the most common use, is in your household. So if you think about and look around you right now, you're using energy right now to hear me. You'll be using energy to charge your phone, for TVs, to cook your food, to heat the water that you use to have your baths and your showers. Energy is everywhere in the house. So we all use energy in lots of different ways. Here's your first graph. Using figure 25.1, describe the sources of global energy supply. It's worth 3 marks. 2 pie charts, but make sure you look at what the pie charts show. A shows global energy consumption. B shows global energy supply. Think about the question on which pie chart you need to use. 3 marks should be done in 3 minutes. You're describing a graph. You're looking for trends, evidence, anomalies. There might not be an anomaly in here, but can you combine data? Can you categorize some of those groups? 3 minutes. Pause the video. I'll come back to you. Welcome back. Hopefully you've managed to describe that pie chart well. I would think the 3rd mark in there, and I want you to do a little bit of self-assessment here, would be to identify the biggest, which would be oil, and use the data, 33%. The smallest, which would be other renewables. The 3rd mark, I think, comes from putting a group together. Oil, coal and natural gas are fossil fuels. So I think you should have really noticed that if my maths is right here and I'm doing it off the top of my head, 87% of fuel consumption or energy consumption and supply comes from the fossil fuels. So you should have mentioned fossil fuels still supplies 87% of the world's energy, which is quite a shocking number when you think about fossil fuels. They give off CO2, that's the advanced greenhouse effect, and that's something that we know we need to start reducing. Normally in class I'd ask you to discuss this with a partner. You might be able to do this with somebody at home. But these 2 maps of the world here, they show you 2 things. The first shows you the amount of energy consumption, how much energy we use. The second shows you the amount of energy supply, how much energy you've got. Therefore, on graph A, or map A, it shows you whereabouts in the world uses the most energy per capita. Per capita means per person. The second one shows you the tons of oil equivalent. That doesn't mean they use oil, it means the equivalent to oil. So it could be renewables, gas, things like that. Take a couple of minutes. Is there any patterns? Places that use a lot, do they have a lot? Places that use a little, do they have very little? Are there any anomalies? And what might that mean? Pause the video. I'll come back to you. Hello again. So, What did you find? Well, there's a few ideas. Places that use the least, well, that's our poorest part of the world. That's Africa, but not just Africa, that's sub-Saharan Africa. And that matches that they've got very little energy in that part of the world. However, places that use a lot, no surprise to see that they're most of our HICs, United States, Canada, most of Europe, Russia, Australia, and they generally have enough energy to supply themselves. There are a few places that use more energy than they've got, though. The really careful ones amongst you might have noticed that places like China, they use a significant amount of energy, but they do not have the reserves, which means that they might have to import energy. This makes them energy insecure to a degree. Places that have got a lot of energy and don't use a lot, they're energy secure. And on this slide, you can see those two definitions. Energy security is about having the right amount of energy available at an affordable price. That's the key point. Energy security means having enough but being able to afford it as well. If we go back to that previous slide, then you can see sub-Saharan Africa may well have a lot of energy, they just can't access it. Energy insecurity is where you do not have either enough energy or you cannot afford it. Here's a map of the world showing places that are either energy secure, insecure, or somewhere in the middle. What I'd like you to do is annotate around your copy in your booklet using this information on this slide. It gives you some regions of the world, tells you whether they are secure or insecure with a surplus or a deficit. Remember, you've seen those words before. Surplus, you've got too much or more than enough. Deficit, you haven't got enough. And it gives you some reasons as well. Just annotate around that map. Pause this video. I'll come back to you shortly. Okay. Last little bit of learning then. The energy gap. The energy gap is quite a tricky concept, but all it really means is how you're trying to replace traditional ways of producing energy. So if you think about the UK, we're trying to cut down on the amount of coal, oil and gas because they're fossil fuels. They're finite, so they will run out, but they also give off CO2 and we're increasingly environmentally aware. We're trying to replace them with things like solar, wind or hydro, nice renewable energy sources. The energy gap is the amount of energy you lose by stop using traditional resources that hasn't yet been replaced by renewable. So effectively, if you used to make energy using just coal and suddenly stopped, if you didn't make the same amount of energy using renewables, at that point, you've got quite a big energy gap. It's about how you replace one form with another. So that's the end of this question, this key objective. That's the end of the first bit of learning this week. So you should understand the global pattern of energy supply and demand. You should really know who's got the most, who's got the least. You should know where uses the most, even if they haven't got it, why they might use the most. Think China, why do they use such a massive amount of energy? Well, there's two reasons, isn't there? They fit the pattern. Massive population, so the most populated country in the world, but also the most rapidly developing. So people have got more money. More money, you can spend it on more products that use energy. Feel free, once you've done this, to submit your work to your class teacher, and we'll be giving you a little bit of feedback on it. There's no big question to answer at this point, so there'll be no model answer, and then look out for something similar this time next week. Until then, I'll try and get a haircut so I can get my video on and get my face on the video. But until then, stay very safe, keep working hard, take really good care, and we're all looking forward to seeing you very soon. Thanks, folks.